everyone. I am going to go ahead and get started with this month's first lesson, the Beginner's Bliss. We are going to be working on the flower cutout, and we're going to use our stencil. The first thing that we want to do is go ahead and paint the flower with the magenta paint. If you want to change the background color, that's totally your call. This month you got a Lazy Susan in your box, so if you want to get that out and use that, that's an option as well. This is just a little tool that will make the turning a little bit easier. It makes dotting a little easier, so I hope you enjoy that. I did a little unboxing video and put it in the group, but this month there are a few things I just want to mention to you. So you have a little cup with an S on it. I think I put the S on there for spackle, but what this is just a filler. So if you ever have a rock, sometimes in shipping, maybe it'll, get a little chip, or I've been trying really hard to get bubbles out of the upper surface of the rocks. But if you ever want to use this for filling, it's just a filler. I usually just put a little bit on my finger and smear it in there till it's smooth, but this will be good for filling in any bubbles or bumps. And then some little extras this month. So we have a little pot of glitter. I don't use that typically in my dots. Sometimes it can be hard to get the glitter to look proper, but you can use it for top dots. Sometimes I'll also use that for the side. So that's just an extra embellishment. And then you have a little cup with some sequins. I'm not going to use those today. I'm going to use those for next week's lesson, but that's what those are. So today you'll want to get out. Oh, did I mention this? This is just a little tiny, like you'll see it's really thin, cutout circle. This is just an extra circle for you to practice on or play on, or if there's a design that you really liked to do an extra little session with. All right. So I'm going to set my box aside here and do a little flipperoo on my camera. There we go. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is paint this, and I'm going to use my magenta for the background. I'm just going to give this flower a good old coat of pink. We'll just let that dry for a second there. So this month we are working on our swoops and swooshes. And so I'm going to start doing some of my swooshes in this project. We're just using the tool in our kit here, but you do have a pencil with a little pin on the end. That is good for swoops as well. If you haven't already found, there is a little swoops video in the guides that you can find and use and practice with. And then there also is a printout if you want to have kind of some guidelines to practice on. All right, my flower looks pretty dry, so I'm going to get my stencil. We are still using the stencil with the multiples of 8. So I'm going to try to line this up. Each line should end up down the center of a petal. And if you can get those lined down the center of a petal, you'll know you've got it centered perfectly. And then my little white pencil. Oops. I removed it too soon. I got ahead of myself there. All right. I don't always use every cross line here, but it is helpful to have those. Next month, we are going to start, well, I'm not going to completely switch because the multiples of 8 is my favorite stencil to use while dotting. But next month, we're going to have multiples of 6, 6 petaled stencil. So that'll give us just a little more variation in our designs. But I'm going to open up my paint here. The consistency should be good. Usually on the first, especially the first workshop, the paint consistency should be really good. Maybe by the third, we might need to thin it a little bit, but just kind of look at your paint and make sure it's mixed up and ready to go.
Tara, on the cross lines there, how many do we fill in?
I just did 2 circles.
So it's not that important to do them all?
No, I try to do as little as I would need for the design. That way it's less that I have to mark off. But because once we get towards the petals, it'll be pretty easy to center in the petal. I just kind of did them like the tiniest one. What did I do with my stencil? So I just did the tiniest one and then the next 2 out. So the first 3 towards the center I did.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so the first tool I'm going to get is my pink. Not my pink. Yes, I'm going to get my pink. I'm all flustered. I'm going to get my pink stick tool, and I'm going to go into my turquoise paint, and that's going to be my center dot. Remember, when dipping, get in the habit of always going over the edge. Get a lot of paint on there. And we're going to get this one nice and centered. And then I'm going to switch to my green stylus on the large end. And I'm going to go into my light pink. And for this, we're going to create straight, I forget how I called the different swooshes and pulls, but I'm going to pull straight out from the center. So I'm going to put this down, not change pressure, and pull. Let me use a different color on my paper so you can see it a little bit better. If you want to practice this once or twice on a piece of paper, go ahead and do that. But we're not going to dot with this one. We're going to put it down. It's going to touch the paper, and then I'm just going to pull. And you'll see the paint starts to thin as it goes outward. And so I'm going to pull a few of those out from the center. As you can see here, I've got them all around the middle. So if you want to practice a couple to get kind of good at those, one of the biggest mistakes that people sometimes make with these is they vary the pressure as they pull out. I just put it down and pull straight out like you're writing with a pen. So if I was doing it with a pencil, I would put it here and I would just keep pulling until I run out of paint. I don't lift up the pressure or vary the pressure. Okay, so it's one quick pull. And I'll show you eventually what happens if you just keep going is you run out of paint and you're left with this swoosh. All right, so on my flower here, I'm going to do one on the lines that go down the center of the petals. So that ends up being every other space. In your toolkit this month, you have a mechanical pencil, which might seem like a funny tool to have in there, But when we're doing these swoops and swooshes and pulls and pins and all these little things, this little tiny lead in the mechanical pencil is super handy for fixing things. So on here, I've got this one, like this one here is just a little bit smaller. So I can use this lead, this pencil lead that's really tiny to kind of even these out. So this can be a really handy little gadget. And I just wipe it off and keep it with my tools. And then I'm going to switch to the purple sticker rod and my light purple paint. In between each of these, I'm going to add a purple dot. And so use your best judgment as to where to place them. You want them to fit in between, but not smushed on top. So it's going to be on the line that goes in between each petal. And we want to put it right in between those two dots to fill in that space, or in between those two swoops. And remember, as we're working, you can always change the placement a little bit. You know, that can change just kind of depending on our mood for the day and how we're creating. So your placement might be slightly different from mine as far as the spacing, and that's okay. But we're going to get those in there. The next tool I'm going to use is the blue rod, the blue stick, and our green. And I'm going to put one dot on the line that goes in the middle of the petal at the end of the swoosh. And so we're going to do 8 of those. For the next step, I'm going to use this green stylus. If you want to try using the pencil that was included in your kit, the pencil with the pen will work similarly to the green stylus. And some people really prefer the pen, some people really prefer the stylus, but you can try the difference between the two. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk the dots around these green circles, and I'm going to do that with the purple paint. So I'm going to go around one time and do a center dot on each one. And then I'm going to walk the dots on each side. When you walk the dots, just try to keep your spacing pretty even. Usually the faster I go, the better. On my first one, I fit 5. So I'm just going to try to make sure I do 5 on every one. When I do the walking the dots, I like to do all of one side and then I go around and do all of the other. Again, it's just a personal preference. You can do one side and then do the other if you like that better. Actually, I think judging from what everybody's been doing in the group, I think y'all are familiar with walking the dots, but this is the process where you don't redip your paint. So you start dotting, and you can do this straight or in a curved line, but as you continue, each dot gets a little smaller. So you dip once, and then you can curve the line. But this is one of those times where we don't redip each time. And so I did all the right sides of the dots. Now I'm going to do all the left sides. All right, the next part of this step, I'm going to use the same tool. So these pink lines that we put around the center, usually I call those swipes. That's just where I use the paint and I pull straight. I usually call that a swipe. The next thing I call swoops. It's the same thing as a swipe, but instead of pulling straight, I'm going to pull at an angle, at a little turn. And it's the same process. I just do it as a little turn. So you don't vary the pressure. You let the paint run out as you're working. But I'm going to add some of those swooshes. So these are swipes. I'm going to add some swooshes. The swooshes are what I call the curvy ones around, oops, I've got some green on there, around the sides of these purple dots that we just created. And so I'm going to get some paint on the end here. And I am just going to swoop on each side. And then I spin and swoop, swoosh. Right, for the next step, I'm going to get my large pink rod or stick, and I'm going to stick it in the turquoise paint. And I'm going to put it on the same line as the green dots. And for me, this was starting to go on the petal. So the placement is up to you. You can go farther down the petal if you want to. Next, I'm going to use the purple rod and the light pink paint. Next to each of these turquoise dots, I'm going to add a centered pink dot here. So right next to it, we're going to walk the dots on both sides, but this is going to be the center dot. So before I walk those dots, I am going to add a pin from each of these. So I'm going to show you how I do my pins. So for the pin, you're going to need either the tiny side of one of the styluses. So you can use the little tiny tip on the blue one, or you can use your mechanical pencil. Both will work well. And I'll show you on my practice paper here. When I make a pin, you're going to make a dot. So this is the same size dot as the pink one. And then you're going to pull a little piece out. So it ends up looking like a map pin. And so that was with the stylus. Here's with the pencil, but it ends up looking kind of like a little pin that you would use from the office supply store. So I'm going to do that with the pink. And just because it's been a moment, I'm going to make sure that this pink is still plenty wet. So just going to dot just a little pinch of paint in there. And then you just pull that outward towards the end of the petal. So I'm not making this dot any bigger. I just want to make sure it's wet enough to pull some of that paint out, just because I get onto yammering. And all right, the next step at the end of this petal is to walk the dots on the side of this large turquoise piece. So once you have your matte pins in the center, I'm gonna use the same color pink and the large end of my green stylus tool. And on each side, I'm just gonna walk the dots around. And I'm doing this on both sides. For the next step, we are going to add some swooshes on the side of the pins. And so for this, you can use your green stylus, the large end, or the pencil with the pin on the tip. like I bumped my camera here and now it's not focused right. All right, so for this, I'm going to use the turquoise paint. I'm going to go ahead and use my pen tip just to show you how it works similarly to this. But you're going to dip that ball end. So whether you've got the stylus or the pen, you dip the ball end into there, into the paint, get it nice and wet, and then you just swipe on each side. And I'm going to do this on both sides. And again, I like to do one side and then come back for the other. So I'm just putting that right next to that pin down the side of the petal. And if you see designs that are super perfect and their swoops and their swipes are all the same length and all super perfect, what they're doing is they're using one of these tools to make their swoop or their swipe. And then they're going in with a tiny tool and they're adjusting. So like on this one, they're two different sizes. Sometimes it just happens like that. So you can kind of extend the line if you need to make those similar lengths. So that's how you get them to be more perfect, is you place them on there and then you can adjust with the tiny tool. So that's what I use the pencil tip for. You can also use the tiny end of a stylus to do that. So this here is the basic part of the design. The next step is top dots, but I'd like to pause for a second. And then if you want to share what you're working on, you don't have to be on the same step. Heck, you don't even have to be working on the same thing, but I'd love to see what you guys are up to. If anybody wants to share, you can put your camera on. So I'll give everybody a minute to do that if they want to.
I don't know how to get my camera on.
I think I can send a little prompt. Let's see. If you want to pass too, you don't have to. Oh, there's Mary. I see Mary. Let me replace Mary here. So what you working on? Oh, very nice.
All right. My light's bad.
No, we can see it. It's good.
You see it? Okay.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Let's see. I see Shauna. Let me get her up here. Oh, very nice, Shauna.
Thank you.
And in true Shauna style, you are outside.
Yes, always. It's cold.
It is chilly today. It was very unusual for June.
I'm going to put on jeans and a sweatshirt.
Awesome. Good job.
Tara, I got behind, so I can't show mine.
That's okay.
I'll have to watch your video later.
That's okay. It's optional to share.
I'm in the dark, so.
No worries. No worries. All right. I'm just going to zap mine with my heat tool here for a second. Let me mute myself so I don't.
They're pretty.
I love these colors.
I really like this palette too. So I always plan at least a month, if not 2 months in advance. And I've been using these even after planning. I've still been using a lot of these colors. This was a fun palette. Sometimes it's hard to tell when you're planning out colors because they don't always translate the same way when you dot with them as they would, just looking at them together. But I'm going to go ahead and top dot. Your top dots, I always like to tell people to feel it out and do what you like to do for top dots. Always a good idea to make sure the paint is somewhat dry so that you're not ruining your first dot. But I had used this navy on top of the turquoise, and then I used metallic pink in some of the other places. But please feel free to play with the top dots however you want to. I think that's a fun way to make it your own design. All right, so I've got to a place where I'm happy with my top dots. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording today, and I will see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.